Hi, it's Rob the Frugalist here, and today we are splitting logs. So we're going to give you 10 tips or more on of things I've learned about splitting logs, things that you may know already, some things you might not know already. For this I'm going to be using this axe here. I can confidently tell you that this is a 4.5 pound axe, hickory shaft, bought from Wickes. It's a felling axe. How do I know this? It's basically written on the side here. I have no knowledge. Let's get started. So our first tip is that actually the axe doesn't need to be that sharp. The axe is not slicing through the wood like an old felling axe, even though this is a felling axe. The axe is actually splitting the wood. So you can imagine, well, this is how I imagine it anyway, wood is basically a series of tightly bound together straws, basically sucking up all the nutrients and water for the tree, and what you're trying to do is separate them out, not cut through them. So often if your axe is really sharp and a felling axe, it can sometimes hinder your ability to split because it's slicing through and lodges itself in, which then you need to pull it out often with great difficulty. So what we're not too worried about it is being the sharpest thing on earth, and if you can see here, you can see that while the edge is sharpish, there's nothing to write home about. So that is the very first tip, is don't worry if it's not too sharp. Whether you use an axe or a splitting wheel, the same is true. Second tip is this. Gloves. Need gloves, need strong sturdy shoes, and ideally safety goggles, because things can fly around a lot and lodge itself in unintended areas. Also, when you do a lot of splitting, you're going to get blisters if you don't use a glove, so it's a good idea to put yourself some nice thick gloves on. The third bit of advice is, and you can just about see over, not quite over my shoulder down here, is to use a splitting stump. This over here is a splitting stump. It raises the level of the wood you're trying to split, which makes it a little bit safer for you to hit. If you don't have a splitting stump, then gravel or dirt will probably be okay, but avoid things like bricks, stonework, anything that can blunt your axe or deflect it, because that'll be incredibly dangerous. So that's your third tip. Tip number 4 is that you don't necessarily need every tool in the world or the latest, best thing that's come to market. You can use a splitting wedge. I've not. You can use a splitting grenade. I've heard they're great, but you don't need to wait for that before you get started. I've not. You can even get these things which fit onto your drills, which are conical shaped and which will split it allegedly. And I've heard a lot of people have poor results with that, and in fact some people think that's pretty dangerous because of the force you're applying it, and things can go flying. So don't worry too much about what axe you have or whether you've got the latest, greatest, best with the best reviews. Ultimately it's going to come down to your strength and persistence. Tip 5, it's a good idea to start small. So with that, we'll begin. So I've got a nice small bit of oak there ready for me to come and split, so let's see if I can get lucky with it. Now, I'm not an expert with technique. I work in IT, so I have weak IT arms. There'll be people with better techniques out there. Go and research them. What I would do, I stand away, make sure you're not tired, and legs slightly apart, knees bent slightly, axe over the top of the head and into the wood. I've seen some people going over the shoulder. It may be better, I don't know, but it didn't kind of work for me. So I would say work with what's comfortable for you and also what's safe for you. This bit's probably okay actually. How do I know whether the piece is small enough? I say, will this fit in my log burner? This one is borderline. It will fit in the log burner, but I think it'll take a long time to burn through, and it'll take a little longer to season. So that's that. Started small, splitting nicely, as you can see. No secondary hits needed, so we can move up the size from here. Tip number 6 is figure out the grain with which you're slicing and cutting and chopping and splitting. So you can see, if you look at here carefully, you can begin to see this is probably a great splitting point coming through. Because these have been cross-cut, they should already be lined up actually, so it shouldn't matter too much. But when you get into the larger logs, you'll need to look for the cracks and work on those cracks. So if I have a look here, this one I'll be surprised if I'll be able to split, to be honest. But you can see there's some cracks already. I'll be working with those cracks. So always look at the grain and the cracks for weak spots in order to split. You can see how this one has cut. The grain is right at an angle. You can see how it's warped and it's ribboned a little bit, and that just makes it a lot more difficult for it to split. But it's very rewarding when it does. Point 7 is work in small batches. If you're using a chainsaw, don't chainsaw everything and then try and chop everything. It's exhausting chopping. So I would get a bit of a rest in between, work in small batches. There's a temptation to, if you're kind of focused on resource utilization, to actually do that. Just get all the chainsawing done at once, all the chopping done at once, but then you're going to have lots of problems with space, etc. So it's better to establish a nice simple flow, get a bit of flow efficiency going for when you're splitting wood. So think about flow efficiency, work in small batches, so you can, you know, cut some, chop some, stack some, and repeat, and that way you'll get a nice flow going in what you're doing. Point 8 is keep other things out of the way. I'm going to go and get some glasses, because actually one of those bits of wood flew past, not that close to my head, but it's a little bit flyy, so I'm going to stick some glasses on. So taking my advice earlier, I'm not a great fan of safety goggles generally, but yeah, I quite enjoy seeing, so I'm going to do that. But check, when you know you're going to split some wood, it's going to go left and right most likely. It could come at you. It has done. I've been hit by a piece of wood. It hit my shin pretty hard. Didn't break it, didn't bruise it, but it felt painful at the time. So I'd suggest you just watch where that wood goes. Make sure there's nothing that you don't mind breaking in the way. Top tip number 9, don't do this tired. Once I was doing it tired, I was coming towards the end, I wanted to get it done, and my weak IT arms went down. It hit a knotty piece of wood. Knots are difficult because the grain changes, right? The grain goes in different directions, becomes almost impossible to split. And the axe bounced off. Okay, now I was still holding on to the axe, fortunately, but I went at a 90-degree angle with the axe and hit my chainsaw, breaking my chainsaw. I fixed my chainsaw, and I can tell you how I did that some other time, but the chainsaw was just in reach, so it wasn't even close to it, but it was just in reach by the length of an axe held by my adult male hands. So you have to watch out for that. Don't do anything tired, because that's where you're going to get injured, so use common sense, please do that. And tip 10, when you get a larger piece like this bit, and it's perhaps not the best bit for the example, but what you can do, often you whack the axe into the middle and it will stay there and nothing will happen. So what you can actually do is nibble it, a little bit like taking slices out of a cake from the outside, weakening it as it goes. It's a really handy way to deal with those much larger pieces, and I may be doing that with these here shortly. So hopefully we'll get some good shots of me doing that. Just a second. So I'm going to start with a nibble technique right away. Once I've got my goggles on. Let me go and get my goggles. We've got the goggles on now. We're going to have a go at the nibbling. Nibbling the edges. There you go. Case in point, I missed the edge, went in the middle, nothing happened. So I'm going to move it more towards the edge. sure. If you tend to be struggling like I am now, I'm now turning it over to see if there's any cracks to develop. And there's a couple of potentials, so I'm looking at those. There we go, got it. Now we're going to have a go at slightly larger pieces. I'm less optimistic about whether this will split easily or not. I would probably more cross-cut this one here in half before doing it, but let's try it. I might learn something. There's a crack appearing down here. You can see the split's begging to go. I'm going to invert it on its head now and see if that'll have a better effect, because it's gone all the way through. There we go. When you've done that tricky first one, the rest should come a little bit easier. Now this sort of stuff will make great kindling. So on this one, I can see the grains at a bit of a slant, so I've got to go in at a slight angle to try and take advantage of that. What have I learned from that? It's flipping exhausting. So I've learnt sweating. They say wood heats you twice. Once when you're splitting, the other one when it's burning. I think it's a bit more than that. It heats you up when you get the wood, when you split the wood, when you stack the wood, when you restack the work after it's inevitably fallen over, and then finally when it's seasoned, when you burn it. Okay, you can probably tell getting pretty tired now, so I'm just going to do one more log and call it a day. Work in small batches. Look after your back when you do it, for heaven's sake. You need your back, which is why I tend to swing the axe directly over and accelerate towards the end. If you've got a better technique, let me know, I'm all ears. Beautiful. There is a theory that you can split in the opposite way that the tree was growing, you'll get a better split. I read it online somewhere. I've just flipped this over and it's split a lot better, so who knows? Next I might talk about chainsaws, but I'm not a chainsaw professional, so I have to think about how to do that in a way that doesn't endanger life. Alright, I'm done. Hopefully that was interesting. The thing you begin to learn when you get to the smaller size pieces of wood to split is how much effort to use, so you don't need to use your full effort on something that's quite small. You remember the phrase, using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and you begin to get used to what is an appropriate use of force. And that's it. So happy splitting. Let me know how you get on, and just know when to stop and use common sense at all times. Cheers, see you later.